The real universal guides are representatives of the true reality of the all is, and they continually and tirelessly endeavour to present to everybody possibilities beyond which they have always known. The ultimate objective is to show individuals how to be self-sufficient, to show them the potentiality of a position of real survival in real universes, the like of which defy our personal self's mind's ability to comprehend. It is a position, a universal position, that requires recognition, and the most interesting aspect of this whole affair is that we already are these beings of real light, but we must recognize that we are so. This opportunity is available for all, and the real guides have approached every individual on the real side, regardless of if the person realizes this or not. This is where awareness is important, for an individual can quite conceivably meet all the real guides, but not realize who they are, or what they represent. The majority of people will experience far more limited experiences in their dream arenas, and their recollection will be lacking in comparison to one who sings the new you song, and opens up far more so the real side, and brings back the adventures to the personal self also. Everybody will be dreaming, because everybody has 4 other body vehicles and a real self, operating them all in the real universes. All these vehicles will have their corresponding life levels, vast dimensional realms in their own right, and these life levels are not switched off just because we happen to have our awareness in our physical one-dimensional bodies during our day-to-day waking activities, or just because we don't happen to recollect the experiences on waking. Most people will not afford the real side much attention, even though the physical life level that they hold so dear is the passing dream and the dumping ground for everything that is being set in motion from the other parts of the created personal self, the other life levels. The real side, then, is where an analysis of everything that we are can be examined, the emotions, thoughts and imagination, and how they culminate, to create our experiences on the physical level through the process of idea creations to effects. Everything is an isness, and so, in actuality, everything is contained in every new moment. There is, of course, no levels, therefore, ups or downs, ins and outs, and travelling from here to there. Though it's far easier to determine the construction of our unceasing creational experiences if we can fan out the 5 bodies and determine what we are constantly activating with them. For this is the design of the created personal self, and all its various aspects, as generators of idea considerations and emotions, to constantly create experiences for our journey to real self-recognition. We could certainly begin to determine the way we choose to utilize our effect-generating vehicles simply by observing what we see in our physical level environment. Life is always demonstrating to us, if not on the real side by way of experiences, then on the physical life level by what is currently occupying our immediate environment. For nothing can feature in our experience unless it is by our design, unless it is by the cause creations that we have agreed with that make it so. It can be said that we are the products of our environment, depending on the social design of it, its laws, morals, and environmental impacts. Will our current personal self be adjusted accordingly as a survival tactic? The personal self would naturally seek to survive, to fit in, and be accepted, as it always will seek comfort and happiness. This is its overall motivation. To look around the place you happen to be in, you can ascertain the kinds of considerations, morals, and behaviour regulating sensor blocks that your personal self would have taken on in this lifetime in order to be socially acceptable and to survive. If you were brought up in a very barbaric environment, the sensor that regulates behaviour would be less stringent. Such people may quite readily attack and kill each other with no concern or agitation whatsoever. But place such a barbaric individual in a society where such behaviour is denied, where this particular moral upbringing ensures the censor will not allow such behaviour, it's likely this individual will not survive very effectively. This censor is developed according to the society or place in life an individual finds themselves. All individuals will have a subconscious, where all manner of things will be sought and desired, regardless of how dark they may be. Placed in a so-called civilized society, these subconscious drives will be largely suppressed by what the society deems as appropriate behaviour, and this censor is then adjusted to prevent these subconscious desires from reaching the conscious mind and causing a great upset to the individual. For such an individual was brought up in a place where killing is bad, and thus to harbour thoughts of wanting to do such things would be rather traumatic to such a person. Thus the censor prevents such trauma. Although some individuals seem to have a faulty censor that seems to not get set in place, despite being in such a society, the various mass murderers and so forth. But if we go along with the notion of an individual being the product of their environments, we must consider that there are various stages of environment that an individual progresses through, and each becomes progressively more so as the individual grows up. We would begin life then in a very contained and relatively confined setting, in the houses we are brought up in, and then progressing into scenes and situations and places beyond this starting point, taking our first venturing steps into the world, but always having the home as a base, as it were. From there we would go to school, and then into the wider world, into the 9-to-5 cabal, slavery, job positions, etc. Whatever is the structure of the society we are in will be ingrained progressively more so as we grow up. We then reach school, and the indoctrination begins. Survival, as it pertains to being socially accepted and acceptable, becomes then very apparent at school as a necessity. So we are slowly moulded into an individual, much like any other, in whatever place on the planet we happen to be in. We have become the product of our environment. although our initial environment is very small and the sensor aligning will begin there, the responsibility falls on the parents to mould the individual, or begin to, in such a way, to morally fit in with wherever they happen to live. If we take our barbaric friend from earlier, we can see he would have been brought up in a very barbaric home circumstance. Then his barbaric nature encouraged and enforced as he ventured further beyond his initial home starting point into continuous barbaric encouraged circumstances. It's interesting how the personal self tends to be set in the first 5 years of life. Whatever the child is subjected and exposed to lays the foundation for the individual's personality, considerations, and attitudes. But always there is, of course, the option to make personal alterations in the interests of survival. This would explain how some of our mass murderers are created, for often is the time where we find such individuals had abusive parents or malicious home situations that very much may have created abhorrent tendencies to the individual and set the stage for them becoming the next Hannibal Lecter, although not always the case, as some individuals have the perfect upbringing from the perspective of their respective society, and yet still become the next mass murderers. This censor that regulates behaviour is created according to lifetime circumstances and environments, and of course we have had multitudes of lifetimes. The previous lifetime will set the stage for our current one. What we have set in motion with our causal, created idea agreements is always projecting us and laying out our next lifetime. With this we can see that most lifetimes will be along very similar parameters, what we like, chase, and want now, we are projecting into the next incarnation. There are many variables. We are also subjected to the creations of others, and agreement to these will further add variation to future lifetimes. But generally, we have created our personal selves as we have, and the ideas we incorporate from others will bolster whatever it is that we have decided for ourselves. If an individual has become very abrasive and aggressive in their created consciousness, they will align themselves and effect experiences in keeping with their creation. They will always be in these sort of worlds and situations. They will most likely be in these barbaric societies, and generally you would have thought, not finding themselves in a country or world where acts of barbarism are morally acceptable, and yet a few would seem to slip through the cracks to find themselves in places they simply don't fit into, made apparent by their behaviour regardless of their upbringing. If an individual has had very extreme and aggressive lifetimes, their censor must be less stringent, and perhaps, if they find themselves in somewhere completely different, no amount of programming and upbringing can completely make the adjustments necessary to ensure that the individual doesn't turn into a raving, antisocial lunatic. Everyone decides what they will do, and what lifetimes they will have, even if they don't realise this. And if a barbaric individual finds himself in a life where he still clings strongly to his barbaric created consciousness, he must have inadvertently, unconsciously, agreed and decided to whatever particulars brought him here. We do tend to follow similar lines of lifetimes as our created consciousness becomes very routine and fixed in its cause projections into experience, but nevertheless it is the real you deciding all of this.